Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Code. Today I'm joined by Stevie Epstein. Do you go by Steve professionally?
Steve, yeah.
Steven?
Steve, and any
Okay,
of the above.
by Steven Epstein, who is a an architect. Like how do you call yourself? A systems engineer?
Cybersecurity. Yeah, it's like a distinguished cybersecurity and AI engineer.
A distinguished cybersecurity and AI engineer. Is that a title that you have to achieve, like a distinguished engineer?
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So you'll tell me about that in a minute. So you're a distinguished engineer with a wealth of experience starting in the mid 90s and now are working on something very, very cool, hopefully preparing us for the future, preparing our technology infrastructure for the future, both on the defense side of things and also I think wider infrastructure as well. I'm sure like the defense world is just like the one who's the most worried about it, but I think we all need to up our game on our rails so that we're in a better position for what the future holds for us. But we'll get into that afterwards. Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzy Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Stevie, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me here today. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you and your background?
Okay. I got a degree from bachelor's degree summa cum laude from Boston University in 1987. I have a master's from Columbia. I then worked 5 years in Bell Labs in the heyday of Bell Labs with the likes of Peter Shor and Lov Grover, who are critical to this discussion, and we'll discuss that later. I moved to Israel in 1996, and then I've been 27 years in NDS, Cisco, and Synamedia, which was the same company that changed names and ownership a couple times. I was a fellow there. I had 50 patents during those 27 years. And since then, I've been working for the last 3 years in Rafael Defense Industries for the Israeli government, trying to improve the defense of the state of Israel.
Trying to improve the defensive state of Israel. Do you want to elaborate on that, or we'll get to that? We'll get to that later.
Yeah, I mean, where cyber has become the fourth dimension of defense. It's always land, air, and land, air, and sea, and now it's land, air, sea, and cyber. So both offensively and defensively, and to protect mobile munitions, cyber is a critical piece. And I've been working with trying to improve the cyber defense of military equipment.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit about like what it was like getting into computing in the 80s.
It was, well, when I was computing, there were a couple
It
big
wasn't like
companies.
going to school, like when computers were just starting to become more of a
No, I mean,
widespread used
I guess
thing.
in the mid '80s, the computers were still, it was quite widespread. I think the bigger issue was that there were no startups then. There were very few startups, and working computers meant working for a big company. In America, for instance, it was meant to be either working for AT&T Bell Labs, or in the New York area, or IBM, or one of the big defense companies. Then Northrop Grumman was then Lockheed Martin. Um, there were no startups. There were no up and coming companies. Everything were these major. Either you worked for a big telephone company, computer company like IBM, or DEC Digital was back then. Wang was another big computer company, or you worked for the government. There were people pretty much, everyone in computers lived around one of those major corporations, and states which didn't have major corporations, basically no one working computers. Because there was no internet. Everyone had to work on site. I mean, the internet really was started and became popular in 88, 89. This was before, Tim Berners-Lee and the World Wide Web.
So did everybody want to work for Bell? Was that like a very coveted place to
That was
work at that time?
coveted. Bell Labs pretty much invented everything. They invented the telephone, they invented the radio, they invented the transistor. They invented C, they invented C++, Fortran, um, Unix. Everything came out of Bell Labs. Bell Labs I actually had a frustrating experience because to get into Bell Labs you need a 95 average or above.
Okay.
And and therefore you had all these superstars working in Bell Labs, but it was like playing for a basketball team with 5 Michael Jordans, but only one basketball. So one guy had to, everyone wanted to be the chief architect because that's what they were their whole life. But in every project of 20 people, there could only be one of those. So the guy with the 95 average and just testing was not too happy. But Bell Labs had those standards. Unless you were
Okay,
basically
but you like
the cream
fought
of the crop.
your
So,
fellow students in class, and like you landed that job. You probably were so
yeah, it
happy.
was no, but yeah, but it was definitely interesting. You met a lot of important people who changed the whole nature of computing. And all over they would give presentations. I remember just in my building we had 6 Nobel Prize winners.
That's insane. No pressure. um, okay, so that you were there for like 5 years,
For
and
5 years.
then what prompted you to leave?
Well, I met my wife and we're going to move to Israel. So I spent a year in Wall Street just making money and
Always a good thing to do.
which we actually was interesting. They were building the first, search system where you can search for news articles and get them really quickly in order to be able to make the trade faster than others. So that was an interesting project. So I worked
It
with that
was
for a year.
like a website for analysts where they can get like
Yeah, well,
information
it
that they
was
could
alert. You
derive
could
for
put
their trades.
company names, and then you would have it sent to you, sent to your computer. And that technology really didn't exist. The whole
Like
messaging,
push technology.
like messaging and push technology didn't really exist back then. So they had to do push via pull, and they did all the standards now, Signal and others that's WhatsApp and Facebook messaging is based on didn't exist. So they had to create these standards and full text indexing system. You have a massive, massive database of all these news articles, and how do you find one keyword in any art or the keywords in any article. This was way before Google and the search engine and all the new search algorithms. So they had something quite interesting, and they actually sold the company for a lot of money. This was before I left. Before that, so I worked a year in Wall Street, and then I started working for NDS.
And
NDS was
NDS also is probably like a startup at that stage, no?
NDS had 160 people at that stage,
Wow.
but somehow they convinced DirecTV. Adi Shamir started NDS, who's like the leading cryptographer in the world. He's the S in RSA, is Shamir, and he created the Fiat Shamir algorithms and a good percent of the cryptographic algorithms Adi Shamir and Weitzman created. So he started 4 companies. Each company became a unicorn. All 4 of his RSA and NDS, and those 2 others he started. I think he was considered at some point the 3rd wealthiest professor in the world.
Wow.
Just because of all the, but he's the most humble person you'll ever meet. So he started NDS where DirecTV had a problem because they had satellite TV, and everyone can put a satellite dish and receive the full footprint. And how do you ensure that only those who pay for a subscription can decrypt and those who don't? What's more problematic is that all the intelligence is in this box, and this box is in your house. So you can easily take a screwdriver, open up the box, and break into the hardware, break into whatever you want to be able to steal the keys and then steal the signal. Once you steal the signal and you get the keys, you can then sell it to millions of people and give them free TV and start your own business.
I mean, I
What
think there
people
were
did.
tons of
There were tons of
companies that were
hack,
doing that, no?
right? So they
Like
created
scraping satellite waves and like giving
scraping.
them
Right.
mass accessible.
If I had a device which could scrape the wave, I can then replicate the device and start my own business. DirecTV will cost $100 a month for a TV. You buy DirecTV for me, I'll sell it to you for $50 a month, but replicate my device. And tons of people were doing that. As a matter of fact, it went from one person who hacked to 1 million people receiving hacked TV within months.
Wow.
So
Okay, so
they're
NDS was like coming to solve that issue.
so NDS came up with the concept of a smart card. And why was the smart card so important? Because it's replaceable. You can upgrade the hardware. It's upgradable hardware. So you pull out the smart card, you put a new one, and then you decrement or deprecate the previous smart card. So, we'll always talk about upgradable software, but if the hardware is hacked, the software is not going to help. So they need to be able to mail in the mail a new smart card and say, if you don't use this new smart card by a certain date, you'll stop receiving the signal. And therefore, if people hack the old smart card, they have a way of recovering.
But
So
today, that's like you just have the ability to update the firmware. It's like software and hardware, no?
yeah, but today typically it's not upgraded. If the hardware is broke, you're in big trouble. If you have a $200 box and the hardware is broken, you have to replace the box. The company will go out of business. You have an $8 smart card that's replaceable. You can then replace the
Right, but
hardware.
to implement that, if you have tens of millions of devices, like it's
Well,
nearly
you have millions.
impossible, like an operational
They had
scale to.
tens of millions of subscribers, and everyone would get an envelope in the mail, and everyone would have a month to put that. With
Sounds so
very
primitive.
instructions. It was so primitive, but it saved the industry.
Wow,
It saved the industry, and I remember with DirecTV. By the time I left, they were up, I think, on the twentieth smart card. So they did
wow.
20 upgrades of hardware over time.
And how did their? I mean, you were there for a million years, like so over those 17 years, like how did their offering evolve? Like
Well, for the
they didn't keep
first,
doing the same thing the whole time.
NDS was an unbelievable, company for the first 17 years um, because basically, we would get ongoing revenue, recurring revenue, and we just had to make sure that the security wasn't broken. So most cases, security wasn't broken, and we get paid every month, and we get paid per subscriber every month. We got a piece of every subscriber every month. So we were just sitting there, earning more and more money because when India started, we had one company, a customer of uh, a million subscribers. By the end, we had, pretty much the major satellite TV system in every country in the world, and we would be paid per subscriber of each company. And we had, I think, a total of 200 million or even more, like 300 million subscribers worldwide, which we'd be paid for. The problem
Wow,
was Netflix. Netflix destroyed the satellite TV industry.
really?
Netflix, when they
Because it went
started, because they went streaming.
in
When
the
the
cloud.
internet got powerful enough, they did two things. The internet got powerful enough that you can receive a broadband and even a high definition television stream. The internet, I don't know if you remember, but with ADSL and others, the internet, initially you can receive text, and then eventually you receive pictures, and then in the early '90s you could receive audio, and then only in the let's say early 2000s you could see low resolution video. Once you can receive high resolution video over the internet, now you can upgrade
It's
the
game
head
over.
end. It was basically game over because all intelligence wasn't in a box. The intelligence in the head end, and the head end you can upgrade anytime you want and change it anytime you want. And the second thing Netflix did is they were pretty much the first company in the world to move to the cloud. Netflix made AWS. It was a partnership. Amazon
In other
started the
words, like
cloud,
they gave AWS like a reason to exist because you
or
didn't
they
have anybody who
proved
needed that
they
much. Like,
initially people thought the cloud was good for websites, but you couldn't build a complicated system in the cloud. I mean, Netflix is an incredibly complicated system. You have a billing system, you have a subscriber management system, you have a TV creation system, you have a video creation system, you have video editing, you have a subtitle system, you have all these systems working. And no one thought you can, so a system like that typically was in this major room with air conditioning and on-prem somewhere. And no one thought that you can deploy a complicated system like that in the cloud. So they were pretty much the first non-website deployed in the cloud, and they deployed one of
wow,
the most complicated systems in the world. And it was upgradable, and they never had to manage the hardware. And that was a mutualistic symbiotic relationship. AWS and Netflix.
wow. So then I
AWS
guess
enabled
YouTube was
Netflix to work with
Google's
the cloud.
Netflix
Yeah, but that was much later. I mean, Netflix started with these
with
cassette
the
players that were
DVD
familiar
mailing.
with the DVD mailing and the cassettes, and then they hired this brilliant guy, Andrew Cockcroft, from eBay, and he had this vision of moving to the cloud, and he really was the engineer that totally changed cloud. And what he proved was that the technology of writing software in the cloud is very different than doing on-prem. he created the concept of microservices and this whole new ways of running, software in the cloud that you change every day, and the agile processes. All that was created by Cockcroft, and he changed the whole industry.
Wow.
And he was the CTO of Netflix. And when they succeeded, um, basically everyone moved to the cloud, and then Amazon and Microsoft and Google just had owned 50% of the computer hardware in the world because no one else had hardware anymore. They just upgraded their software to one of those three places. So when Netflix started, everyone it was warning bells, and no one realized that was pretty much the end of satellite TV because everyone just had streaming devices, which are simple devices, which just receives a signal, and all the intelligence that was in the cloud was in that box, which was in your house. So that was a major transformation, and that basically killed.
So today, like
that was
the
the beginning of
cable
the downfall of
companies,
NDS.
the cable companies, like Yes, like they've all moved
Yes is all streaming.
all streaming,
Yes has satellite TV also, pretty much for the super high
right?
definition.
Like you still see
But
satellites everywhere.
you
Say
still
Yes
see
on them.
satellite. Yeah, but most of them are just like metal objects,
Remnants of the past.
which are remnants of the past. Yes is completely streaming.
Okay, so then when like things were on the downslide, Cisco came in and bought all the infrastructure
Cisco bought So Cisco bought NDS, and then Cisco had
to
the
do what with
stream.
it?
We actually sold them that we just like we had the best security for satellite, we can have the best streaming security. The problem is that the satellite, the cryptographical, the security in satellite TV is very unique, and the security in a streaming system is no different than any internet security. So it was
So
very,
your
very
ability to stay
hard.
competitive was
Well, it was very hard to prove to them. We had the minds and the brilliant cryptographers, the brilliant security experts to stay competitive, but it was very hard to prove to them that was necessary. Just get typical internet security, HTTPS, TLS, put a public-private key somewhere in firmware, and you're done. And
wow. It's
so
amazing. Like
multicast. So multicast. We were doing the security for streaming systems, but we couldn't charge $4 a subscriber. We may get 10 cents a subscriber, and all of a sudden, that's you're talking about falling revenues and therefore falling costs, and therefore they're starting from Cisco 2013 when they bought NDS. They basically the company had 10 years of layoffs, one year after another, just cutting. They went in Israel. They had the high. I think there was 2,000 employees. Today there's 185.
wow. Okay, and then you moved to Synamedia, which was like another company that they acquired.
So Cisco at some point decided that they didn't want to be in the video industry. They said there's no future in the video industry, and they sold their video industry to a private equity company called Primera, actually, and the video industry of Cisco became Synamedia, and was owned by private equity, and they thought that based on different new capabilities that the streaming industry needs, they could recreate the company. For instance, one of the big things I was working on, which was called Everguard at the time, is basically what's the biggest problem with streaming? The biggest problem with streaming is
Bandwidth?
from a security perspective, is that because there's so much bandwidth out there, anyone can create their own TV systems for very cheap. So if I can get a live NFL broadcast and somehow break it, not only am I going to receive the live NFL broadcasts for free, I could create my own TV station where
And
I
you
have
could
1,000
like
subscribers,
sub-broadcast it to other people.
and I can reflect it. I can sub-broadcast to other people, and that's happening because all of our kids are watching all these live NFL or NBA games on all these streaming stations. What's that streaming station? Someone who broke into the real NFL and created his own TV station, and there's software out there to do it very, very cheap. So I was working for Synamedia, which they thought would work, is trying to locate every illegal streaming network in the world and trying to take them down either legally or technologically, denial of service attacks on them.
Wow. So that sounds like a very like tedious work. Like
It's
you weren't like
tedious,
trying to create a solution. You were going like one by one, trying to like, like
right?
fish, like cast a net and catch as many as possible, and then like
And catching and search the internet for illegal streams and trying to
doesn't
prove
sound very
automatically
effective.
with image processing that they look for the NFL logo or look for this logo or look for something unique or put something unique
But
into
then
the
like the
video
C just gets
to
bigger
prove
and
it.
bigger, and like it's
Well, then
easier
they
and
change
easier
it.
to
The problem is that
mimic.
it's also a cat and mouse game. You find it, they start again. It's so easy to
So I'm saying,
restart. It becomes a cat and mouse game that's very hard to win. And therefore, because the recovery time is nothing, it was the streaming broadcasters felt like at some point it's just not worth investing in this because you can knock them down and then a day later they're on different servers with different IP addresses and different clouds, and it's very hard to do any permanent damage to them. You could do temporary damage. So the goal was basically to wait for like the middle of the Super Bowl and take them down, like right as the guy's about to kick the winning field goal, to really piss off their subscribers. And therefore, the hope is that their subscribers would be so angry they would say, "Hey, you know what? I'll just
I'm
pay
out
the
of here.
NFL, pay the NFL for $300 a month, and watch the winning field goal." But it
Wow.
didn't really work.
Okay, so you gave up or they gave up?
Uh, well, the company eventually gave that technology up, and that was actually the last technology I worked on before I came to Rafael.
Okay, but that's like a major life change, and like it's, you spent 20 something years in media and
27.
then you're moving completely out into a different sector. Like, did you take some time to like knock your head against the wall to figure out what you wanted to do, or you just like went from one thing to the
Well,
next?
luckily, the cyber department of Rafael, 60% are ex-NDS.
Okay. So
So
they're making
so
good
they
use of the
they
talent.
they knew me. I didn't even interview.
Oh wow.
Like the boss, who was like 3 levels below me in NDS, was my boss here. Um, knew me and just said, "Steve, if you want the job, just take it." And I said, "You know what? After being 10 years in an environment that they were firing, I wanted to be in a stable environment. That was more important to me than anything else." And after working on television, which from a technological perspective is pretty cool, but from a ideological perspective, helping people watch TV, didn't really do it for me. Uh,
Okay.
Working on the defense of the state of Israel has a little more meaning for me. I figured at the end of my career, the stability and the meaningful work in terms of
Coupled
doing
with the
something
legacy,
real,
right?
right? It was, and coupled with the fact that I'm working with a bunch of friends, so I know for 27 years, my office mate over here started in NDS in '95, and I started in NDS in '96, and I think in '98 we were office mates, and now we're office mates again at Rafael. So working, it's the older you get, the more you want to exploit the friends and experience of the past, and the less you're interested in exploring new experiences.
That's
So
so
it sort
nice.
of worked out for me.
Really, really
Sort of
nice.
worked out for me.
So tell me, what are you working on at Rafael?
So one of the things, well, I'm doing a couple things. I mean, there's a lot of things I can't say. So some of the, one thing, so one of the things I'm working on, which I can talk about, is which I'm leading in Rafael, is the transition to post quantum cryptography. What
So just
happens
take
is,
a minute to explain like what quantum cryptography is and post quantum and difference between binary and quantum.
okay. So basically, um, in I think 74, the internet is based on HTTPS. Okay, so how the security of the internet is based on essentially three different capabilities. The first capability, which is core to HTTPS, is the fact that your server and my client are both, let's say, are trusted devices.
Hmm.
And in the middle, you have the internet, which is untrusted. Anybody could be listening over to those wires, right? There's your communication over the internet, be it over cable, satellite, fiber optic, makes no difference, is untrusted. Now, we have to create trust in a way that the person in the middle who's listening to our conversations cannot create trust with us. In other words, we want to create a shared secret, me and you
Hmm.
being a server, me being a client, but the information we pass can't enable anyone, the
Can't be
man in the middle,
decipherable.
can't enable the man in the middle to create the same shared secret, because that shared secret, all encryption of media basically is symmetric, which means the same shared secret which encrypts decrypts. Typically, it does with an algorithm called AES. Okay, so you have a key which could be 164 bits, 128 bits, 256 bits, makes no difference. But the fact is, you and I need the same key, and that key should change all the time. And the question is, how do we create these keys where the person in the middle, and we don't know anything about each other? Like, I go to my bank. The bank doesn't necessarily know me. I don't install anything to speak to, any special code initially to be able to speak to the bank. So it's basically works with something called asymmetric cryptography. In asymmetric cryptography, there's two core algorithms. One's called Diffie-Hellman, another is called elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. The third is RSA, but it makes no difference which algorithm you use. Basically, these algorithms enable us, by having specific certificates which are signed by a certificate authority, to pass information one from another and end up with a shared key. And that shared keys enables us to encrypt and decrypt, so anyone in the middle cannot decipher what we're encrypting and decrypting. So that's the first technology, which is what's called key establishment, which is critical for security in the internet. The second technology, which is critical, is the ability to sign information, whether you're doing DigiSign or whether you're signing certificates or the blockchain ledger. You have to ensure that you were the one who authored that information, and that information has never changed since you authored it. And that's based on what's called the digital signature. A digital signature is something I create, and then you can verify. But no one else could create my digital signature, because if they could forge everything I do. They can go to the blockchain ledger and add fake transactions and totally destroy cryptocurrency whatsoever. Blockchain ledger is based on ECDSA, which is elliptic curve digital signature algorithm. And that's the second critical thing. And the third critical thing is sometimes you encrypt with a public key for someone else to decrypt with a private key. All three of these things are based on asymmetric cryptography with maybe 4 algorithms, all of them created in the 70s. Okay, the first one's called Diffie-Hellman, which is Martin Diffie and Whitfield-Hellman, created, I think, in 72, 74. I think they also were Bell Labs. And 78, RSA, which was Adi Shamir, created with Rivest and Edelman. And so there's a handful, 3-4 algorithms, basically. And then elliptic curve came in the early 2000s. But there's 3-4 algorithms which are the basis, pretty much, of all cryptography. And what's the idea of these algorithms? The idea of these algorithms is that in order to break it, in order to be able to derive a private key from a public key, they're all based on asymmetric, which means there's a private key and a public key. The private key can sign, and the public key can verify. The public key can encrypt, and the private key can decrypt. And in order to be able to derive the private key from the public key, mathematically, there's no way to do it. And if you try to do it, let's say it will take all the time in the world. No, in other words, in order to create the public key from the private key or create the initial key pair, you can do it quite quickly. But in order to reverse it, it would take all the compute power in the world, and no one has time to do it. Okay, and that was the base, and that's really the basic of all computer security. Without that, there's no e-commerce. Without that, you can't speak to your bank on the internet. Without that, you can't send a fax. Without that, there's no cryptocurrency. Okay, really these 4 algorithms, Diffie-Hellman, elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, and RSA, are pretty much the basis. El-Gamal is the 4th, are pretty much the basis of everything. And that is true. So no classic computer, people for years and years and years have tried to break these algorithms. No classic computer did it. And the strength of the algorithms are pretty much based on the fact that they were created in the 70s and no one broke them until now. So if for 50 years no one broke them, you can assume that for the next 50 years, no one will break them. The problem is that in 1994, Peter Shor from Bell Labs proved that if he had something called a quantum computer, he can basically break these algorithms in an hour, which means there'll be no security in the internet, there'll be no blockchain, there'll be no anything. There'll be no security for military equipment, there'll be no security in the world because everyone uses the same 4 algorithms. At that point, the quantum computer was a fictitious concept. Quantum computer means it's that based on quantum mechanics, you create a new computer which is highly parallelizable and it has what's called a quantum advantage. It can do things with all the compute power using classic computers you can't do in a year, it could do in 10 minutes with a quantum computer. But not everything, only certain things. Okay, and what a quantum computer can do well and can't do is critical to understand, and no one really understands it. People have concepts based on whether something's part of an abelian group or other things. So they think a quantum computer could break or not break. But however, Peter Shor proved that all four of these algorithms, elliptic curve, Diffie-Hellman, and RSA, and El-Gamal, can be broken by a quantum computer if you had a quantum computer with a certain number of qubits. Initially, I thought it was 50 million qubits. A qubit is a bit, a quantum bit, which means it's really 2 bits based on quantum mechanic principle of entanglement and superposition. But that's all. And this, the whole quantum mechanics was really based on time of Schrodinger, Heisenberg, and Bohr in the 30s and the 40s and 50s, and Einstein. So if this quantum computer existed, all of a sudden there's no security in the internet. But no one really was worried about 1994 and 1996 because at that point there was no quantum computer. The problem was that in 2013 there was a quantum computer with 4 qubits, and like Moore's algorithm, every year the quantum computer, people started working on quantum computer and doubling the size of qubits and proving the error correction, and also proving that the number of qubits required to break these algorithms was less and less and less. So you have 3 things happening at the same time, which is speeding up the capability of the quantum computer to break all these algorithms. And then in 2016, NIST says we better find new security algorithms. That's, again, since the 70s, all of computer security is based on the same 3-4 algorithms. In 2013, NIST opened up a competition. 2016, NIST opened up a competition, and the competition was for create a new set of algorithms which we believe a quantum computer can't break. And that competition took 6 years, from 2016 to 2022, and finally in 2022, NIST chose 3 separate algorithms, and since then they have 2 more, so there's now 5 what's called post-quantum algorithms, which are new security algorithms, which means to replace the current security algorithms, which we think a quantum computer can't break. We don't know for sure because there's no quantum computer that size. Now there are quantum computers. The IBM already has a quantum computer with called Condor with 2,400 qubits.
So
Atom has a quantum
how many
computer.
qubits would you need to like apply Shor's algorithm and break existing computing?
So that's actually so it depends whether it's a physical qubit or a logical qubit. A physical qubit is a qubit which is unstable. The problem with the quantum mechanics is that these qubits
Like
are
how far
unstable.
away are we from this theoretical breakthrough?
All
Like
right. So
with like the existing computer?
here's the problem. Until 2 years ago, the core date, the key date, which is called Q day, like D Day. Q day was in 2035.
Okay.
However, now people believe Q day is going to be 2030.
Because like AI enhances like the ability to self-learn.
Because they prove, no, 3 things happen. They prove that you need fewer and fewer qubits because they have smarter and smarter ways to implement Shor's algorithm. The progress of quantum computing, believe it or not, is faster than expected, and everyone's working on it. China, University of Haifa in China is making core breakthroughs, and Google came out with the Willow chip, and the error correction is improving. So in other words, it's more and more. So how many qubits you need? Craig Gidney from Google proved you need 1 million physical qubits, which are non-stable qubits, but you only need 4,000 logical qubits. So if the error correction improves, you can move to 4,000, and we're already at 1,500. We're 1,500 physical qubits. So the number of qubits is improving, the error correction is improving, and the amount you need is going down. And that's creating that some people believe,
Wow.
psi-quantum, some people even claim that it could be broken in 2029. Now, if you think of that, think of the year 2000 bug, which, right, kept millions of people up and made a lot of people millionaires. And that was just change a stupid date in every programming language in every computer in the world. Here you have to rip out all the cryptography,
Yeah, but
all the security.
wasn't Y2K like a big, like it was nothing, or it was nothing because we had people working on making
It
it
was
nothing?
nothing because we had people work on it. In other words, the computer would have been correct. All your dates would have been correct. The computer would have fallen. But think of how much the world invested in the Y2K bag, and how many people made millions of dollars writing code to look at dates and change dates from one format to another format. And here, the core security algorithms, which is a billion times more complicated, everyone's going to have to rip out in the cloud, in their supply chain, based on every vendor, on-prem, in every computer,
You're
and rip
saying
it
that
out and replace it. And
that's
replace
in a
it.
bullish situation, like where they don't just like self-destruct. You're saying like in a bullish scenario, we have like something, that we just switch out quickly and everything's okay. Like you and other people
Correct.
build
The
like the
problem
new
is that
infrastructure. You click
the
a button,
problem is the problem is that the predictions will take 10 years for a company to switch everything out. And Q Day now is 2030. It's now 2025. So
so
and
we
most
already
companies have,
missed the boat on that one.
and most companies haven't started. Which
Wow,
means, what
sounds
does that
scary.
mean? If the blockchain ledger doesn't do the transformation, I can forge any transaction on the blockchain, and there will be no cryptocurrency. Which means if I can, now what's even
You could
worse,
basically derive the private key for
I could
every
derive
public
the
key.
public key from the public key using a quantum computer. And not only that, the quantum computers are going to be in the cloud. Already all these quantum computers are on the AWS bracket and Google. So it's not
Wow.
like I have to pay money to access it. I just go to AWS, access it, say, here's a public key, derive a private key, and then I forge all your signatures.
So presumably everybody's investing in, future proofing themselves. Are there people who are, like you mentioned, China? Like, are there actors who are investing for the sole purpose of breaking everybody else's
So
security and,
what a lot of people like they're
mass
doing,
hacking?
so what a lot of people doing in Chinese and Iran already is I mentioned that when we speak over the internet, we do typically a Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and we create a shared key. And then I encrypt with the shared key and decrypt with the shared key. Now, this Diffie, if I had a quantum computer and I was listening in the middle, I could take the information we're passing, which can't be used to derive the shared key,
Mm-hmm.
and I could derive the shared key. And then I can decrypt our conversation. What people are doing, and a lot of the bad actors are doing already, is they're recording all the communication they can between
Like, even
major
though it's
corporations.
encrypted, like hoping that they'll be able to decrypt it at some point.
And then they have petabytes and petabytes of storage. And once they get the quantum computer, they'll be able to decrypt,
Wow.
reverse engineer the Diffie-Hellman, and then decrypt all the communication. And there's nothing I can do about it because they have it recorded. So even if 2 years from now I will do the transformation to post-quantum algorithms,
They'll
until
still
I
be able
do
to
it,
like post
they'll still be able
decipher.
to they'll still be able to decrypt all the communication I had in 2025 and
Wow.
2027.
So basically, we're screwed either way.
Not that we're look at the big corporations already support post-quantum algorithms. Apple messaging supports post-quantum algorithms. WhatsApp is already encrypting, providing security to post-quantum algorithms. AWS already supports it. The problem is Cisco and their switches are doing post-quantum. So there's two problems. The problem is most companies aren't there yet, and they need to be there, and the world is not panicking enough because they don't understand that it's not a question of if a quantum computer will exist. It's probably a question of when. I mean, the world invests enough in technology, it will happen. The second problem is that all these new post-quantum algorithms, they're called Kyber, Dilithium, HQC Falcon, and Sphinx Plus are the five that NIST approved. It's not really, we don't really know
If they
that
will be quantum
if
proof.
they're how defense, yeah, if they're not chasuf or chasin, if they're resilient against quantum algorithms. So therefore, what everyone's trying to do is create with what's called crypto agility. Crypto agility means is that they can create the algorithms in a way that if they have to replace them another time, they could do it much faster, much easier.
Wow.
So there's a lot of companies out there. There's a lot of
So I'm
companies
sure
out
you
there
can't
trying to
answer
make
to
money.
this, but so are you relying on those algorithms that were developed for NES, or are you
Yeah, no, the
guys
whole
working
world
on
is
your own stuff?
the whole world's relying on this. The
Hmm.
concept of security by obscurity doesn't really exist anymore, which is you create your own security algorithms. Pretty
Like,
much
like
people.
if there ever was a time to do that, it would be now. No.
No, I mean again, NIST has a very strong um, strong group of engineers and testing to try to approve an algorithm. And the assumption is that the whole world is pretty much based on these 5 NIST algorithms. NIST will add 2 more. They still have a competition for 2 more signature algorithms. They have 12 finalists now. So at the end of the day, there'll be 7 new security algorithms.
Wow.
And the hope is that they'll stand the test of time the same way, the Diffie-Hellman RSA stood the test of time from the 70s. But we don't know. They're new. Anything new is, call it kashot. Anything new can be
Yeah.
broken. Can be
So
broken.
how did you get into this? I mean, presumably, even though you have the background, this is still a new technology. It's a new
Yeah,
challenge. There must have been a lot of, a big
they,
learning curve.
yeah. So 2 years ago, they needed someone to do it. I thought that was interesting. I thought this is something which definitely until I retire will be important,
And good intellectual
because it's not
exercise.
going away. And I started reading every paper, every algorithm, looking at the algorithms, learning the algorithms, coding the algorithms of myself, understanding how they work. And so I became essentially a consultant for the company on how to do this migration, and also an evangelist trying to push that the migration happens sooner or later. I mean, military equipment is a problem because typically that equipment's going to be out there for a long time, and once you manufacture it, you don't want to take it back. And anything which is hardware, like a car. I mean, Mobileye or all these Honda or all these car companies, right? They're making cars with classical algorithms. So now they're going to have to recall in 2035 or 2030 every single car to replace the algorithms to go post quantum because the chipsets. I mean, the cost is enormous.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. So what are the stuff that I mean, I don't know how Rafael works, in terms of, I know that it's a semi-governmental or fully governmental owned,
Yeah.
are the things that you guys build uh, to be for internal use only, or do you guys export and sell as well?
And they do both. I'd rather not go into what
Okay, no, I'm
exactly
just
they do.
saying generally,
Yeah.
not this specific,
Yeah. Yeah.
not this, okay. And could you elaborate a little bit on what it is that you're working on, or no, just keep it general at this point?
Yeah. I mean, the post quantum stuff is more,
Okay.
not classified. So I'd rather just talk about that.
Fair enough. Okay, you mentioned that you're a distinguished engineer. What does that mean?
Well, here, Rafael, I'm more of a system engineer.
Okay,
Um, although I kept my title just because that's what I was in
so it's
Cisco. I
what
was a
it's okay. You could
distinguished
toot your
engineer.
own horn. It's fine.
I was a distinguished engineer fellow more in Cisco but basically I was always at the focused on new technologies,
Okay,
how the company can improve using new technologies, what new technologies out there, which new technologies will succeed, which new technologies need to be embraced. That's where I
so you're a
always enjoyed
pioneer in
to be.
technology.
Yeah, and that's why I have so many patents because I've always
That
tried
was my
to
next question. You said 50 patents you have under your name.
approximately somewhere between 40
So
and
what
50. I
what are
don't know
the
exactly how many.
two most innovative, exciting, the ones that you're most proud of?
Um, So one is that DOCSIS, which is a standard, adopted one of my patents, which was how to. So one is the DOCSIS standard, which is based on how
What does
to
that mean?
at that point that was a standard for cable TV,
Okay,
and there was a question of how to give different people bandwidth based on different payment criteria, and they adopted one of my patents, and
very
it became
cool.
a standard. The other I think is interesting is that Netflix, it's interesting, Netflix had this major problem of account sharing, which everyone knows about. Which basically I subscribe to Netflix and I give my password to all my 22 kids and all my neighbors, and you have 50 people watching Netflix on one account. Um, and the problem is how can you detect that? Because I'm entitled to travel to Germany and America and have a summer home and use my Netflix password anywhere. So how can
By
you
the way, it was initially a modus operandi of theirs. I just saw somebody shared on Twitter yesterday, a tweet from Mark Randolph, the CEO of Netflix. Back in the early days, it was sharing is giving someone else your password.
Right.
So like initially they were probably using that as a way to onboard people to the service, not
They were
realizing how
using
fast it
onboard
would scale.
people. So the question is, how do I differentiate between Yitzy Hammer having a summer home in LA and a winter home in Jerusalem versus Steve Epstein giving his brother in LA his password while watching in Jerusalem? So I patterned an algorithm for being able to detect when are people sharing and when are people not sharing.
People are going to really hate you after this.
And I patented that for while I was in Cisco, and eventually Netflix implemented it. And it was interesting because
So how did
when
that
we
work?
became
They have to
Synamedia,
like acquire
when
a
we became
license from
Synia,
Cisco?
no, so when we became Synamedia, um, Cisco gave us most of their patents, but they wouldn't give us that patent that they kept. And then Cisco actually was threatening to sue Netflix, I think at one point for millions of
For
dollars
infringement.
because for infringement of my patent. Yeah.
Wow.
And but at the end of the day, for some reason they didn't. But the algorithm Netflix implemented, I believe, is very similar to when I patented. And I patented this like, way before. I think I patented in 2014, and Netflix implemented it around 2021.
So now would be a good time to like make a new patent for how you could supersede your previous patent, and like everybody could comfortably watch on their
Right,
parents, grandparents, cousins, uncles Netflix accounts again.
right, right. Yeah, now I'm a Netflix subscriber, and I give my password to all my kids. And then they say to themselves, "Oh, we can't watch."
My
I said,
dad's
"Oh,
always like, the only
I
reason
said it's
you
my
guys ever
fault."
call is to ask me for the Netflix password.
Exactly. It's because of Abba. Because of Abba.
Yeah. Okay. So now it's because of Stevie. Good.
Mhm.
So now we'll just all complain about you, Steve.
Yep.
This was fascinating. For all of us noobs who are not distinguished engineers and have to frustratingly sit on the side and watch as you guys work to crack quantum computing, what could you share with our audience to just calm us down and realize that, yeah, Q Day is not really the end of the world?
Look, at most of the big companies are working on it, and they're gonna try to solve it. But again, I think the urgency, because I know you're in cryptocurrencies. I think that's probably the highest urgency, because the blockchain ledger is based on all these algorithms, which can be forged with a quantum computer.
I'm saying it's not
Which
just
means
Bitcoin, which is like what everybody's like talks about. It's
anyone with a blockchain ledger. The whole idea of a ledger is that you have chain transactions which are signed cryptographically, so you know that it's trusted.
right. And
Without
the idea
trust,
is that
there
you
is
have
no
so many
ledger.
nodes that it's impossible to hack. So you're saying
And you
that
have
with
so
it,
many nodes, a possible hack, and everything is signed, which means that no transaction in the ledger could be possibly modified, and the institution or the that signed it is a trusted. The trust has a trusted identity. Once you have a quantum computer, you can't assume that. I can go in and I can mess around with every blockchain ledger and put false transactions and create money to be transferred everywhere. And there can be no, unless, but obviously the cryptocurrency is one of the first one to adopt these new post-quantum algorithms. But if they wouldn't, once it's quantum computer, there is no cryptocurrency.
wow, wow. Okay, so instead of dispelling our nervousness, you just made it worse. But thanks, Steve. I appreciate that.
No, but obviously people have enough foresight to be working to be implementing these new
Okay,
algorithms and be
that's very crypto of you. Just like trust me, bro.
so.
That's like
No. The problem is a lot of people are behind. A lot of people are behind. Year 2000, the reason is year 2000, you had a very fixed date, January 1st, 2000. And you had here, Q day is changing all the time. And you don't know it's going to be 2035 or 2030 or even 2029. But my guess is that the progress is quite fluid, and it will happen. And a lot of people can be caught. A lot of people can be caught without the right algorithms, and it's going to be a major crisis. So it'll be interesting.
yeah, that's for sure. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for sharing all this like very, very important insight. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to hear or not hear what it is that you guys are building at Rafael. I guess not seeing is believing in this in this
Yeah.
instance. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.